Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's. I'm your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and the brand new PurpleTerritoryRadio.com, which is up and live and has all the shows on it. It's not completely finished in terms of like the aesthetics of how it's going to look when it's done. But I've worked on this thing for about 120 hours, and so dag nabbit, I'm going to announce it right now. Check it out. There'll be a link to it in the show description and the articles about the show. But I'm here with Joe Oberly, hence the name of the show.
Morning. I can't stay very long. I have to go plow my driveway for the 10th time in 3 days.
God, what are we doing? It's like living on the moon. It's driving. I had to go to a doctor's appointment this morning. Brutal. I almost crashed even going 10 miles per hour, you hit that ice. Woo! Joe is the editor for PurplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. How you doing, man, outside of the questioning of what we're doing living up here?
I'm good. It's Friday. What can you say? Another day in Canada South here, so that's all right.
What'd you think of the big game?
The Super Bowl?
No, the new AAF or whatever, that new football league. No, yeah, the Super Bowl.
It was obviously less of a offensive firestorm than a lot of people wanted, but I was fine that it was a defensive battle. I'm old school enough that I can appreciate good defense because I went through the Purple People Eaters. And
they harkened back in the first half. They said that it was the lowest scoring since like the Vikings, Chiefs, maybe.
Nope. It was
the Steelers.
Okay. Yeah, it was 3-0 at halftime, and here it was 2-0 or something. No, was there?
It was 2-0.
2-0 for the Vikings and Steelers, but it was 3-0 here. So it was, and then by the third quarter, the Vikings were down 9-0, and the Patriots and Rams were less than that. So they set a new record for the third quarter, and then they were the second lowest scoring game all time, I guess. But
are you surprised by that? Just based on, there's been all this talk about the new rules and the ratings rebound because there was all these high scoring games and good narratives between how the schedule ended up working out. So and then you look at last year's Super Bowl, which I think broke records in terms of total offense or total score or something like that, or maybe not total score but total offense for sure. I don't know. I guess I don't pay a ton of attention to AFC teams. Obviously the Rams have a ton of talent on their defense. But were you surprised by that at all? I mean, I was.
I thought, I certainly predicted a higher score than that, but it's good coaching. I thought going in, I thought the Rams were and their quarterback were in a bigger spot than they were ready for. You saw cracks in their wall coming in. I mean, the Saints should have beat them. The Saints should have beat them, they should have been in the Super Bowl, and it would have been different because you have a more experienced quarterback who's used to responding to the punches of another good team. But it surprised, I guess, a little bit. But after the game started going, you could see that the Bill Belichick, who's a defensive-minded coach, has put together a great game plan against this young quarterback, and they we'll get into the running back thing, but they took that out of the equation, and then you're missing one of your wide receivers, and then all of a sudden it falls on this young quarterback, and I think it's fantastic to listen to some of the analysis of the game, and all of a sudden Sean McVay, the genius, was faced with a situation he wasn't prepared for. They came in and tried to do the same thing they've been doing all season, where Bill Belichick completely changes it up and goes from a man coverage defense scheme that they had shown all year, and then all of a sudden it's zone, and and Goff wasn't ready for it, and Sean McVay wasn't ready for it, and they were flustered, and they could not, they had that long list of punts on all their series. It was just amazing. It's like,
I think they punted on like the first eight or nine series.
Yeah,
they had one first down, 2 first downs maybe.
That's just good coaching, Joe. It's
I feel I put on the agenda a question about the legacy of Brady and Belichick, and oh God, this is gonna piss some people off. All week at the liquor store, I heard people saying, I don't get why the Patriots get to still have Belichick and Brady. They're cheaters. They're proven cheaters. They cheat. And I know that'll always be part of their legacy because they did do some things to try to get a competitive advantage with videotaping. And you can debate the deflated football things if, the science of it, I don't think holds up very well. But you can't say that he isn't a genius. And I want to give credit to Wade Phillips as well, because he was doing some stuff, making stuff look like it was man, then they'd switch to zone. Especially early in the game, seemed to be flustering Brady, which you think would be next to impossible at this point. For his first pass, while it was a tipped ball, it was a bad throw, and it was because they were switching. That I don't think he expected that second guy to be over there. But Wade Phillips clearly had an amazing game plan as well. But back to just Belichick as a coach, I mean, the guy is so damn good that it almost like Lance. I mean, it's different than Lance Armstrong because I feel like everybody was cheating, so he felt like he had to keep up, almost like a Major League Baseball in the '90s thing. I don't think that cheating like that in the NFL is as widespread, but beyond that, he is.
Don't kid yourself.
Oh, I'd like to think. Why is that?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard the old adage: if you aren't cheating, you aren't trying, and it's not. I don't know if it's to the point of Spygate or deflating the footballs or what have you, but I think all these professional sports teams are a business and they're looking for an edge, and they want to keep their jobs, and they're going to see how they can either bend the rules and maybe end up sometimes breaking them. I'm not saying everybody's a cheater, but we have seen coaches and organizations manipulate the injury report for years. We've seen certainly this kind of thing from the Patriots. I think it's out there. I don't think that. I mean, part of it's the society we live in. When the money's this big and it's this high profile, you're going to look for an edge, and if you don't have it on your roster, you might have to find a different way.
And the NFL is perhaps more than any other sporting league prone to replacing coaches. It seems like on a quicker and quicker basis. I mean, you look at college football, and there's all sorts of stuff going on, like that people getting their papers written, paying players, just sending them to strip clubs. So I can't imagine that the NFL is completely innocent in that regard. You're right. Plus, these guys, they're making millions of dollars, and they want to continue to do so, and the only way to do that is to win. And when you have as much parity as you do, everyone's looking for an advantage, I guess. But beyond that, I mean, that doesn't, I guess, give an excuse to what anyone's doing, especially the Patriots. But God, the infographic or the stat thing they showed of Brady versus like the upper echelon of NFL franchises, the Steelers, the Cowboys. He's played in more himself than those franchises have in their decades of existence. That is insane. And I know people hate, especially in Minnesota, where we've been to 4, we lost all of them. I'm not rooting for the Patriots, but I do think that we take for granted that we're in the midst of something that we're never going to see again.
Well, if you're not paying attention to it, you're missing out. Yeah, it's remarkable. It's unprecedented. It's you can talk about all the dynasties that we've certainly seen through the years in this league, but this one tops them all. I mean, for them they've won 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls, and they've been in 4 of them. in their career as Patriots. I don't know. I listed these in my story wrap up. I wrote, and I was just amazed at either the AFC is really lame, or else these guys have a secret, and I really think it's you got to take your hat off to Belichick to keep finding players to buy into his system, to plug and place, of very good players who have been disgruntled other places, and then to put them in and figure out how to use them and get something out of them. And then when he doesn't feel like he's going to get it, he's gone. He's moved on. It's quite remarkable. And Brady's got the attitude where he is just still wants to be out there winning and still wants, enough is never enough. He's going to keep going for it. I mean, you saw the joy and excitement and exhilaration on his face throughout the playoffs. And that's just amazing to me. I thought they were done. I thought we saw the beginning of the end last year at US Bank Stadium. And in fact, he finished this game off lifting the trophy and says, I'm going to keep playing. I mean, hats off to these guys. Cheaters, maybe. I'm not sure what you can prove and really hang on them, but it sure seems like there's a lot of smoke there. But it's more than that. You don't have this kind of dominance if you're getting a little edge by deflating footballs or spying into their team.
That last drive, or the touchdown drive, not the last drive, the throw that he made to Gronk is such an elite throw in so many ways. Just the throw itself, the stage, the fact that nothing had been working all night. Hats off to McDaniels for running that play. I watched like a 5-minute video on NFL.com's Twitter that showed like the mic'd up all the sideline talk and how that play came to be. They actually ran it 2 plays before, and it didn't work, but they saw an opportunity. I mean, those are throws that are so Brady-esque in those moments. You knew that he was going to make a move towards the end of that game.
Of course, and that's partly because they've been there so many times. In fact, they just lost last year where they just kept gunning until the end of the game. And, they're not afraid of that moment. They're not afraid, oh my God, what happens if we lose? Because they have lost. But they also have won. And both of these are just, they're not, you're not even going to think about that. That's not going to affect you. But you certainly saw some panic from the second-year quarterback from LA. And he wasn't ready to respond. I mean, he did his best, and they all did their best. But even Sean McVay said he was outcoached, and he was. Yeah, there's no two ways about it. I mean, this experience breeds, I don't know what, it makes you a better player. And if you they say you can learn more from a loss than you can from a win. And imagine how determined this team was after last year.
I think Brady said that he wanted this one more than any that he's played in. I'm sure he says that every time, but they did have that a little bit of an underdog
mentality.
I'd say more mentality than what was realistic. The last thing I think the Rams wanted was to become one-dimensional and have Goff be like a drop-back guy. They were. We talked about this on the preview that they were a top 3 play-action team, and that's their bread and butter. And I don't know offhand, but I'm sure it's probably less than 5, for sure 10 play-action plays. And there's all these articles out there about Gurley and the one that I sent you yesterday, which I thought was just such a bad take. It was titled "This is Why You Don't Pay Running Backs," and it was essentially saying, why would you give a running back top money when they can be no other position on the field can end up being sidelined based on a scheme thing. And I understand that he was taking the stance that Gurley wasn't injured because he wasn't on the injury report, and the Rams would be penalized relatively heavily if it turns out that he needs surgery or they hid that injury. But I can't imagine in a game where the score was low, so they didn't necessarily need to move away from the run game, that they would go to C.J. Anderson, the guy who's making like $90,000 a year, and not give Gurley the ball until like 3 minutes left in the first half, and 10 times total, the same amount that they did in the NFC Championship game, unless something's wrong. I mean, there was what they were doing wasn't working, clearly, so you think that they would say, okay, well, we're not losing. It was a tie game, at one point 3-3. Why not give Gurley the ball more unless something is wrong? You know what I mean? I just feel like...
Well, of course I do. I said this going into the game. I thought it was going to be one of their problems because they have... this was the guy that, he scored the most rushing touchdowns all year. He's been the workhorse. He's been the reason their play action is so good. He's been, the thing that a quarterback like Goff needs. And suddenly he was gone in the playoffs, not just the Super Bowl. He was gone before that. And so you asked me if I was surprised by the result. What I wasn't surprised by is after 2 series that it was going to be C.J. Anderson. Because they did this in the championship game, and they did it again either time with no credible explanation. And he got injured late in the year. He injured his knee. He was ineffective. I had him on a fantasy team, so I watched him pretty closely. And in fact, for our league, and he spit the bit on me to lose. So I was watching. This guy's hurt, and they did why they didn't want to say it. Why they wanted to keep him out there. I still think there's going to be some kind of cleanup surgery on his knee in the off season. And if that's the case, they should really go back and maybe levy a fine against him. But the explanations were not good. Sean McVay says, "Oh, it's just the scheme, or it's just the." Hello, I mean, I don't get it. They went out and had to buy or sign C.J. Anderson for a reason.
Yeah,
because something was wrong, something was amiss, and you saw it. And C.J. Anderson's play did not get him all those carries. It's the fact that they saw something in Gurley that either they didn't want to risk a major long-term injury, or I don't know. It's still unexplained. And
they said the gal on the sideline at the beginning of the game said that he. All week they said he was going to be a big part of the plan, and that he was running hard all week in practice, and that he woke up on Sunday and said that something was wrong or his knee was swollen or something like that. So that was it seemed to be the explanation.
It kind of sounds like injury to me, Joe.
You know what I mean? I mean, on that stage too, it's like you can't hide it, and it was so glaring. I wouldn't be surprised if I forget what the punishment is for that, but I know that there was people saying that when the Packers took Rodgers off the injury report and then put him back on or whatever last season, that they might have to give him up as the penalty, which was never going to happen, but it was fun to talk about. I think that might be the harsh penalty that you can get, but. Maybe they're going to say that they didn't have on the injury report during the week, and then he was injured, that he woke up and something was amiss, so that's why it was that way. I could see that too.
That's fine. Then say that. Afterwards. Game. Don't sit there and say, it just didn't go in the flow of the game. It just didn't work into our scheme. Well, it worked into your scheme all season long.
Yeah.
And suddenly you didn't go out and say, let's pick this guy up off the scrap heap and replace the best running back in the league because of our scheme. It doesn't make any sense. And Sean McVay is showing that, he's a great offensive mind. He's a blah, 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 blah. We've heard Sean McVay till we're blue in the face, but he's not the he got in a big spot too, and I don't think he handled this right, and we'll see what happens. But, it hurt him, that's why I said coming in, I didn't think Gurley was. Nothing had changed the way they were talking about it, so I thought, okay, Gurley's not going to be that much of a factor. That puts it on Goff's shoulders, and Goff's not ready to handle it. And so as far as their offense scoring that 3 points, I wasn't surprised by that, I guess.
Not in that situation. And there was a guy that I guess put $250 on them scoring 3 points and made 6 figures in Vegas. So
nice.
he's got to be happy they missed that field goal. Couple other things. This kind of ties up the conversation, but I wanted to add something after that. Just based on the fact that the Rams didn't have Cooper Kupp, Gurley was clearly not himself. You have to think that, outside of a big Super Bowl hangover, that they're going to be in contention next year, depending on how many players that they might lose in free agency. But to get to that spot without their version of Julian Edelman and Kupp and without Gurley, from a Viking standpoint, that's a little scary
I don't think the Vikings should be afraid of him. That if you're got that good of a defensive coach on your staff, I think the Vikings have a pretty good defensive coach on their staff. You should be able to slow this team down. You saw what he did. For me, I thought all week long, this is why aren't other teams breaking down and diagnosing what Bill Belichick is doing each week?
Yeah.
They say going in, he's going to take away your best guys, and then he's going to make you play left-handed and make you beat him with lesser players. Well, he did it to the Vikings. He did it to the Chiefs. He did it to the Rams. On and on and on. Why can't anybody else do this?
It's even. I think that's a testament to what we were talking about earlier, which is how good he is, because they call it the Belichick curse. All of his assistants who have been there for years go to get their head coaching jobs, and it always, up until this point, Josh McDaniels had a horrible time. Things haven't started out too great for what's his face in Detroit.
Patricia.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe if they try to be too Belichick too early and they treat the players don't like how rough they are on them or whatever. But that's got to be if they can't, with all the personal insight that they have into what he does, if they can't replicate that, I don't think anyone can.
Well, it also depends on reputation too. What 10 Super Bowl appearances in the 20-some years he's been in New England. My goodness, that speaks for itself. That means people want to go there and they got to go buy in. He got Randy Moss to play ball for a little while. As soon as Randy Moss started getting a little
Randy Moss-ish?
Yeah, he was gone, unceremoniously. And so I don't know. All I can say is it's out there right in front of everybody, and how the fact that you can't get other teams to do something similar is amazing. Every once in a while someone throws up a good game plan against Bill Belichick and they beat him, and Peterson did last year in the Super Bowl. So
yeah,
it shouldn't be that difficult to do. Look at this guy. But I say he's a phenomenal coach. He's got to go down as the best ever after this is all said and done. And
sure.
I think that's what him and Brady are still playing for. It's the only thing out there for them still to attain. They've got everything else, and they're probably going to get this already too. But they're going to solidify it.
Yeah, the run's not done, and you got to look at a guy like Julian Edelman is the last thing I wanted to talk about. I know Gronk came up big too, and there's a lot of talk about him retiring, but I think he was on Jimmy Fallon, and he kind of tried to answer without answering that question. But he's only 29, but he plays so physically that he just racks up all these injuries. Edelman though, Romo in the first half was so in awe of what Edelman was doing. He was showing how wide open he was getting, even when he was double teamed. And it's somebody dug up a take, and this is what one of the hazards of being a talking head in the era of the internet in regards to sports, because you have to make some predictions. You have to constantly, I don't want to say, some people try to make hot takes for the sake of making hot takes, which we've discussed, you and I, and that's something that we try not to do. Clickbaity stuff, but there was a guy from the local sports radio in Boston who back in 2011 was saying that they should call Edelman Mr. August because he's always so great in the preseason and then he never shows up, and that his peak level was going to be special teams. And that's up there with my Adam Thielen versus Mobo take, I believe. And so somebody tweeted that, and then players from the Bruins were saying, can't we just get a muzzle for this guy? He's horrible. But Edelman, there was controversy beyond that with what's the CBS guy that did the halftime. It must have said something about Edelman not being a Hall of Fame wide receiver, and that took off during the week, and then he sounded really defensive during the halftime, saying that's not what I meant. I was just, putting the question out there. And at this point, I think Edelman is just trailing Jerry Rice in regards to stats in the postseason. And you can say that he's a product of the system, or that he's a product of playing with Brady. But you can make that same argument about Jerry Rice playing with Steve Young and Joe Montana. And the fact of the matter is that he's the Super Bowl MVP, and he's good. You know, the first half showed that. I mean, he was getting wide open. He might be, you know, everyone talks about what a great route runner Diggs and Thielen are, but God, Edelman's got to be the best route runner in the league. It's just, he's aggressive with it, and he's like nearly impossible to cover.
Whoa. There's a reason why he's still there after all these years, and I mean, like I said earlier, they plug and play a lot. And Edelman's had a number of concussions, and he's always been on the edge of either on the team or gone. I mean, they had that other guy who was kind of the same body shape. I can't remember his name
Wes
right
Welker?
now. Yes, and so they obviously have a system that relies on that tough slot player that can get open. But the fact of the matter is, if you should go through the list of receivers that Brady has thrown through in his career, and it would be a long and sorted list. Some of them are good. Some of them are very good. Gronk's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, but stuff like that. But generally, they're not. You know. From Deion Branch to now, you got Cordero Patterson. You know, and who knows if Cordero will even be there next year? He might.
Yeah.
You know, but he's not needed to be this major contributor. They just put him in certain spots. He performs and does his job, and then goes to the sideline. So. You know, Edelman, I've always seen him. He's always been there. They have so many different receivers. You never want to, you know, none of them ever get great accolades because other than someone like Gronk, because there's so many of them. He uses so many different receivers in each offense that he runs, and so none of them's gonna, you know, get big headlines. Well, Edelman. He did this week. He got the MVP of the Super Bowl, so people are going to pay attention to him, and maybe they'll start figuring out how to take things away from him. Who knows? You know,
the one thing that they didn't really talk about during the Super Bowl is the fact that the Patriots lost Josh Gordon to his substance abuse issues as well.
Right.
He
plug and play.
Exactly. You know, they're supporting him. They're saying all the right things, and he's so dangerous when he can play, as we saw a couple years ago when he had like 200 and some, like 75 yards against the Vikings at TCF Stadium. So they were without a deep threat in that game, which maybe helped Edelman. But anyway, back to some Viking stuff. We're going to talk a lot about the different free agents, unrestricted free agents that the Vikings have, and kind of group them together and talk about that. But before we do that, one of the big stories this week was the fact that the Vikings are considering moving Reef to guard. And my question for you, Joe, as somebody who hangs around the team a lot more than any of us do you think that might be a move to get Reef to restructure his contract? Because I think he's due like $11.5 million this year, and you know, I just can't imagine why they would do that, considering how bad that worked with Remmers, and you think that they would just focus on bringing in some interior guys in the draft or maybe free agency and leave Reef where he is, leave Brian O'Neill where he is. I don't know. God, it's a multifaceted question, because then is the question, do they move Brian O'Neill over there, or do they draft a guy, or are they looking at a free agent like the guy from the Patriots, who I think his name is Brown maybe, but he's going to be super expensive. I don't know. It just seems like leave the tackles alone and deal with the guards is my take on it. Because there's no guarantee that the guy you draft is going to work, or that Reef isn't going to be a disaster at guard, a la Remmers. What are your thoughts?
Okay.
And one quick thing too is I think Remmers had played guard before. Has Reef ever played guard?
I'm not sure. I know that he's been back and forth from both sides of the both tackle spots, but
maybe I'm confusing him with Remmers. I know one of them did, one of them didn't.
Oh no, Remmers had played guard before. That's what. Yeah, they had moved him in. I don't think Reef has, but I don't know. You know, it came from a good source. It was in the Star Tribune, and they said sources said that they're thinking about this. I'm sure they're not going to count out anything, you know, and maybe they will then focus on another a high draft choice of a tackle, which is and who knows? I mean, it'd be hard to get a rookie tackle on your left side to protect your $84 million investment. But they really liked what they saw of Brian O'Neill this year. I don't know if it's a good idea to then just take him and move him to the left side from just a couple of years ago he was a tight end. Well, now he's a right tackle, and then you're going to move him to left tackle. I don't know, but they know better than I, and I'll say that at the outset. They know what they're doing. Yes, they do. Of course they do. They see these guys working every day. They know if they can handle. I mean, maybe they feel like O'Neill could handle Danielle Hunter. Who knows? They see him in practice all the time. I don't know. I mean, they certainly know more about it than we do. And
I think they have more information. I don't think they make the right conclusions sometimes.
Okay, well, then you should be coaching, I guess.
Well, they won't return my calls, and I don't understand why.
They've got to get 3 new bodies that can play on that offensive line this year, whether they're guards, tackles, or what have you. If they're going to get another center and move Elflein to one of the guard positions, I think they're not discounting anything, which I applaud them for, and not just.
I agree with that.
Going with the status quo. I mean, they're trying to look at different situations and say, will this work? Does this have, blah, blah, blah. I mean, Reef played well until he started getting nicked up and hurt the past couple of years. But you don't always hear that. People
and he was playing next to he was playing next to he wasn't getting a lot of help, People
like to beat up on the offensive line, which deservedly so. But, I think what they saw, out of O'Neill was great. I mean, this is a guy who just is learning this position, and he was a little undersized, and he started out a little rough and had to be thrown in there early, and he responded. So maybe they're saying, well, maybe we got someone who's going to take another jump next year. I wouldn't personally move him if he did that much. I would let him solidify himself as your right tackle, and try to find either someone in free agency or whatever. I don't know. They've got a lot of work they have to do on the offensive line, so at least they're open to some different combinations.
I don't want to get too apocalyptic about the line this early in the off season. I mean, the season just ended a couple days ago. The rational side of me says they have to look at everything, like you said, every combination of what they have versus what they might get, and what'll work. And the story was that they're looking at it, not necessarily that it's going to happen. And so, the way that the internet works is everyone dials everything up to 11 and freaks out right away.
Yeah, it's like what we're doing right now.
Well, yeah, and there's part of it's for entertainment purposes, but so the rational side of me says, of course they're going to look at it. They're going to look at every configuration. That's what they should be doing. But this is also a rational take, but it's more of a theoretical thing because we don't really know what's going to happen. But if it came down to it, I would rather keep, like I said, the 2 tackles where they are because they were the 2 bright spots. You have to think Elflein will be, he was coming off of a surgery and it took, it wasn't in game shape and he had no help from the guards next to him. But he's shown that he's more than a capable guy. And so you have to me, it's all about the guards. And if you can improve that position, which is cheaper and easier in regards to plugging in a rookie because it's just a less demanding thing, that's the route they should take. But, I don't want to get mad at them for looking at it, but I would not be happy if it happened, just because. Well,
you also got a new assistant coach on offense. You've got a new offensive coordinator. And now you have a new offensive line coach. The Vikings just announced this morning they hired Rick Dennison as their offensive line coach slash run game coordinator. So maybe
he's a big Kubiak guy, right?
Yes, he is. And that's we don't. You said earlier we don't know what's going to happen. We certainly don't know what's happening because they just announced a new offensive line coach. I think he's going to have some say in it. They also moved Drew Petzing to wide receivers coach, or he has been. He was an assistant quarterbacks coach in 2018. Now he's the wide receivers coach, and they named Marwan Malouf as the special teams coordinator. That should be fun to say and type all year long.
I saw some stats about Dennison and his time in Denver, and he was always a top 10. His lines were always top 10. They were around 9 or 10, but they were always consistently pretty good. And I would be ecstatic with a 9th or 10th ranked offensive line.
Right. So maybe that's what this is a response to. I mean, he's been rumored to become the guy for ever since Kubiak got hired, and it's just they just announced it this morning. So maybe he's looking at his personnel and saying, "Hey, how about if this works here and we can get this, do this there?" And it's a matter of I'm looking at everything and us trying not to tell them what they should do because we don't know as much as they do. I'm going to say that again. We just don't. And
but I skim the headlines every morning, so
yes, you do. Sure. Yes, you do.
I'm pretty sure I know. Yeah, we'll see. I've clearly not been happy with that whole situation, but. Yeah, no, we don't need to delve into this because we have a bunch of other stuff, but Adam Nelson, one of the newer writers for the sites, wrote an article about the 10, 100, 1,000 club that both Randy Moss and Chris Carter are part of, and how close both Thielen and Diggs were to making that club this last season and how they can do it this year. And I think that is a testament. It's been fashionable to shit on Kirk Cousins a lot, and I don't want to be any more of a defender than I have been. But considering how there were some games where the offense was non-existent, how bad the second half of the season seemed, the fact that they, something that even in '98 Moss and Carter didn't do at the same time, I think it's a testament to the potential of this offense, that they were that close. It's a different league, obviously.
Well, I would say that's a reason right there, is because I'm looking at Adam's article, which is really interesting, and it says that Carter did it in '95 before Moss came there. Moss did it while Carter's around, but it's, Diggs and Thielen are kind of work against each other. They've been both so good and so productive. They've been, heading towards these numbers for the past couple of years, and it's tough to get, either one to that level because the way the Vikings, offense is set up, they're not going to just throw it to one person time and time again, which is what the case was with Carter. So I think you need that to get there. Terrell Owens, Jerry Rice, Jerry Rice did it with another good receiver on the staff, but that they had the West Coast offense that they were constantly throwing. But I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to see if one of them made it. But I like them both as a duo more than I like them as a one
single entity.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if any team has ever had two guys the same season do that.
That'd be pretty tough, I would think.
Yeah.
It's not that much to go around, but
maybe that wouldn't be the best thing either, because it might imply the lack of a run game, which I think contributed to those inflated numbers, especially early in the season. But we will see. One of the articles in the Star Tribune this week was about loyalty versus production in terms of Everson Griffin and whether or not they are going to keep him. His contract situation, he restructured with 2 years left on his deal to get more guaranteed money, but basically he gave up a lot of power to the Vikings to be able to get rid of him should they want to. And I know we had that question on the Q&A after the show a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was when I was on one of our other shows. And I feel like, he clearly struggled this season with some mental health stuff. And I think it might, people's memories are so short these days. Maybe it wouldn't reflect poorly on the team if they moved away from him. But I feel like if he can tackle that this offseason, that there's no reason why he can't come back and produce. I mean, when he wasn't dealing with that, or wasn't dealing with it on the level that he was this season, I mean, he was on pace to break records 2 years in a row. And you have a guy like Danielle Hunter who's younger, but who you team up those, you have those two guys there next to Linval, and depending on what happens with Sheldon Richardson, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm not a big fan of this move. should it happen. I know that they need to find some cap space somewhere, and maybe he'll restructure just based on what happened this season. Again, I know they want a lot of people to restructure, but moving away from him and then drafting somebody when they have so many needs on the line on the other side, I don't think would be the best move.
I have to stick with what I was saying earlier. I don't think they'll get rid of him. I think you're right that a restructure may be in order, and that's what you leverage, towards him. He's 31 years old, but he's still very productive. And when he came back, he was rusty as heck and out of game shape because he had missed three games or something like that. And he was away from football completely, so you weren't going to get the same out of him. But that doesn't mean that his abilities have completely deteriorated. I think you got off season, you get your ducks in a row as far as your mental health and your personal life and your situation and figure that out. And I mean, Danielle Hunter's great. He's 24 years old. He's great, but he's only as great as there's another threat on the other end of the line in this defense. So I don't think he's signed. I think the fact that they brought him back and they kept him on the roster the entire time and he's going through this says a lot about what they feel about him. So I don't think it would be a mistake to do so unless in fact they feel like he's done, but I don't think so.
Was he a captain?
Yes, he was a captain of the team.
I thought so.
He's a leader in the clubhouse.
There you go. That's you can't overlook that, especially another captain being Anthony Barr, and that being a big question mark this offseason, which is a perfect segue for the.
He's probably got a big cap hit too. That if you got rid of him, you'd be eating some coin in cap space anyway. So I don't think you get rid of him.
No, you're right. I mean, I think his dead money's pretty high.
Yeah.
I know that Reef's is pretty high too. I'll go really quickly through the full list of unrestricted free agents, and then we'll talk about a few of them. Everson Griffin isn't one of them, but Sheldon Richardson is. Tom Johnson is. On the offensive line, you have Tom Compton, Brett Jones, Rashad Hill, and Nick Easton. On the defense, the other ones are Anthony Barr and Marcus Sherrills, and then you have Trevor Siemian at the quarterback, Aldrick Robinson wide receiver, and Latavius Murray running back, and Dan Bailey as a kicker. And also on the defense you have Harris and Iloka. So there's a lot of guys that are on sign. Let's start with Sheldon Richardson. He's a big talker. People have been writing. I forget which one of the new writers wrote the Vikings should not re-sign Sheldon Richardson, which got picked up by Bleacher Report, which was a great article. And it's a great partnership that we have now, as we're providing a lot of the Vikings news for Bleacher Report. Earlier in the season, I was very happy with Sheldon Richardson. I mean, he started out with some ungodly numbers like pressures and everything. We didn't really get to see the four horsemen because of what happened with Everson Griffin. Yeah. If he would have been himself, I think things might have worked out differently. But they have depth on that line. They can draft guys. They've shown that they can draft guys late or even pick up undrafted free agents on that defense and mold them into something. So I don't think he would be, just based on this list, would be missed as much as other guys.
I hope they sign him. I like what he brings to the team. He brings a little bit of the nasty. He's he next to Linval Joseph is quite the duo. I think that's a formidable defensive line, and as you saw by both the Rams and other teams, even the Patriots, that a good defensive line can really disrupt some things on good teams. So I would love that they keep these four guys intact for a year and have it go as a year that's they're all uninjured. They're all healthy. They're all happy with their contract. They're all ready to go and win some rings. And
I'm assuming his cap, like his number. Maybe the market isn't as high for him as I assume.
Well, he was available last year, and they went after him and got him. And I don't think he did anything to play himself out of a position here. His desire for a bigger contract might cause problems. But they're going to have to be doing some restructuring throughout this lineup because they have, like, coming in before the cap increases, they say, to $20 million. The Vikings have $10 million, and it's just not enough with all that long list of free agents that you listed to have them all be happy. So there's going to have to be some restructuring, and I hope it starts with number 8. But that's just me.
I don't know at this point. I have a feeling they might franchise Barr. But outside of that, maybe he's gonna leave. It's been so long, and they've been working on this contract for over a year, it feels like, or it has been, and just the lack of progress seems to me like they're just on two different levels. And Barr is such a Zimmer guy that I know Zimmer would want to hate that, or would hate to lose him, but it's kind of seems like that'll happen.
I think I might have brought this up last week that I was talking to Mark Craig from the Star Tribune, and he pointed out the fact that Zimmer was talking about Barr and just said, yeah, I'd love to have him back, but, and he didn't really finish that. And so, I mean, they all know the realistic nature of this situation, and that he could leave. He wants a lot of money. He's probably pissed that he didn't get he's on a 5th-year rookie contract, and the guy drafted after him, his former teammate from college, has already got his restructured. So it's possible he could leave. I think he wants to be here, but I think he wants big money, and it's going to be hard for them to do that without a lot of restructuring. But like you said, they could franchise him.
Yeah, I could see that happening, and I think that would only increase. I think he's making $12 million, and then the market for a franchise linebacker would be like 14.5 or 15. So it wouldn't be too bad. What do you think about Sherrills? I love Sherrills.
You gotta have him. Unless Hughes is going to come back and take over for him. But Hughes is going to need a year before he's back up to speed. So I think Marcus Sherrills buys himself another year as a returner on this team. He's just too good at it, and he has some value as a deep backup cornerback. But I think they'll re-sign him. Unless he wants to break the bank, and I'm not sure he does. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy.
No, I know he wanted more money like last year or the year before, and I thought that might be the end of it. But he's just so sure-handed. He turns nothing into something more often than not, and that's something that you don't want to take for granted at all. And the same thing goes for Dan Bailey. I hope they keep him. A couple of those misses weren't his fault. There were holding issues. Considering just all of the drama we've had at the kicker position, I would like to have some stability. Keep a guy who still is the third most accurate kicker in NFL history, and build on what he did as opposed to drafting somebody. Everyone keeps talking about these guys from college that they want, and it's like, let's just stick with the veteran for once.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see him come back. I think he's a good kicker. He's got a strong enough leg. He's accurate. Once he's comfortable in his position, maybe sign him to a couple-year contract so he's not looking over his shoulder and run with him and try to take the pressure off him. I think he'll be fine.
I'm gonna
I was just gonna say get someone that has been taught how to hold the ball.
Maybe that might help. Now that we have a new special teams guy whose name I cannot pronounce, I'll save a couple of these for next week since we have a long off season. But the last one I wanted to talk about was Latavius Murray, because he actually wrote an article for one of those websites that are where the players actually write articles themselves, and he talked about this season, and he said that while it didn't end the way that he hoped, it was still successful in his eyes. And a couple weeks ago, he said something like he wants to, he's got a great relationship with Dalvin, but Dalvin knows that Latavius wants to be a starter and that he wants to compete for that, and he's made that clear. And a lot of people took that as he wants to go somewhere else and get another starting opportunity. But in this article, he basically said, "I would love to come back and play for the Vikings." And maybe that just is him saying what is the right thing to say as a player. But just looking at this list, and assuming Dalvin Cook is going to be healthy next year, and we're not going to deal with any hammies or anything. God, I don't know. I'm torn because Dalvin is shown that maybe he can't last the full 16 games, but you could maybe find a guy in the draft that can do what Latavius has done, but I don't want to take that for granted either. So it's hard. That's a hard one.
Well, they got a couple guys on the roster that could possibly fill that role if Latavius moves on. Selfishly, as a member of the media, Latavius got the Good Guy Award this year. He's always available to the media.
Is that an actual award?
Yeah, absolutely. And they have a little ceremonial before the last game of the year, and where they have him come up, introduce him. He talks to the media and thanks them. And I congratulated him afterwards and said thanks for your availability, because he was always available to the media. So that's beside the point. That has nothing to do with what's on the field. I think it will come down to assurances that he would get a certain number of carries from the Vikings for him to stay here, because he does want to start somewhere else. I think he should look around and see life out there for running backs in this league. It's not like it used to be, and maybe it is a pretty dang good situation for him, because in the past 2 years with Dalvin Cook ahead of him, he's got plenty of playing time. And they're gonna make play action pass offense a premium this year. A big part of it, I think, it's because that's what they brought Cousins in here for, and having Cook. And so I think there's opportunity for Murray to stay here. I don't know that he will. I don't know if how much money he's looking for, but I truly believe him. What he says is that he'd like to stay, and I guess I'd like to see it. But like I said, there's Mike Boone and Rock Thomas behind him, so and they've got those guys around for a reason. So we'll see.
Alrighty, well, like I said, we have a couple more we'll talk about maybe next week or the week after. Chad Greenway should be on the show next week, we're hoping. We almost had him on this week, but he is busy with his new business venture, and that seems to be going well. So check out Grey Duck Vodka the next time you go to your liquor store. It should be available at most liquor stores in the state of Minnesota and South Dakota. Also keep an eye out for PurpleTerritoryRadio.com. It is up. You will be able to click on the shows that you like. You'll be able to subscribe to those shows through iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, some of those on iHeartRadio, some of those on other things like Stitcher, Podbean, so on and so forth. We have it set it up now to where if you subscribe to, let's say, Morning Joe's, that's the only show you're going to get. Before, you were getting all 10 or 11 shows, which is just too much. But we're very excited about PurpleTerritoryRadio.com. I want to sound enthusiastic, but it's been the hardest website I've ever had to build, and it's still not done, but I figure I'll get the word out there sooner rather than later, because it's fully functional and it has everything. It just doesn't look 100% the way I want it to, but we'll work on that. Thanks to everyone for being patient on that, and we're excited to grow our audience now that we have our show untethered from the other shows. That sounded rude, but you get what I mean. We will be back next week. I want to say Tuesday, because we want to record on Tuesdays this off season, but a lot of that's predicated on when Mr. Greenway is going to be available next week. So just follow us like you guys always do, social media, so on and so forth, and we'll definitely announce that as soon as I hear from Greenway, which should be today. But this has been Morning Joe's, the Super Bowl edition. It's been a fun season. Hopefully the off season will be better and we can recharge our batteries and get some hope, because it's pretty bleak right now. But thanks for listening.
Boy, just moving to a crescendo at the end of it. Love it. Boy, you sound like a man that's got to go plow out his driveway. Come and plow mine.
It's like the end of the song "A Day in the Life" by the Beatles. Emotionally. But yeah, this has been Morning Joe's. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Skol!